I go into a panel, come on in, come on in. Every time I go into a workshop or a discussion, I'm just amazed, not just by what's being talked about and the incredible workshop leaders who are just have so much to offer, but also by all of your faces. You know, when I look around the room, I just see smiles and just your eyes are all lit up, and it makes me so happy to know that this is working. And so, yay. Hi, Zoom friends. So this is the power panel. This is the whole reason for this conference, really, is to talk about the dynamics of power between any student-teacher relationship, and realizing how that's evolving and how we must, as educators, continually interrogate our understanding of power. Not just our own, but our students, and how that relationship of power moves. So because this is such an important conversation, I needed to have a really amazing moderator. Oops! It's so funny. Lisa and I've been working together for a number of years now, and I've been a long admirer of her work and her activism. And it's funny, we were in the lobby going, oh, this is the first time we've met in person. Which is wild when we work at the same university. Like that's a wild, and that's happened to me a lot today with many of you. And so, I think I'm so grateful for many reasons, but that is one of them, that we are back together in person to have this experience and not just online. But back to the amazing Lisa Karen Cox. So Lisa is an assistant professor at Toronto Metropolitan University. She is an incredible activist, not just for all things, but mostly the way I know her is as a student activist. And that I loved her the minute I knew about that. And so she's an incredible activist in many areas, but as a student advocate, she is one of the strongest. She relishes work that combines music and movement and heightened language. And she's worked with numerous theater companies all over the place and playwrights units. And I'm just so delighted that Lisa agreed to moderate this panel with this incredible group of humans here. Thank you and welcome, Lisa.
But it is a deep pleasure to be here. I have a long relationship with education. I started as an elementary school teacher. I'm an Ontario certified teacher. I worked for the Toronto District School Board for 10 years. And now the grades are starting to catch up with me. And now I work at TMU as an assistant professor. I really believe in inquiry-based pedagogy and student-centered learning, and power is at the heart of those choices. How do we empower our students and pass the power back to them? We no longer need to engage in what was called Paulo Freire would call the banking model of education, where I am the expert and I'm just going to dump knowledge into your brain. Sorry, in your brain. Dump knowledge into your brain. But we can actually go back to the origins of education, where it's an exchange, where we learn something from our students learn from us as well, and they are therefore empowered in that process, as are we, because our growth continues through them and with them. With that, for our Zoom friends, and for folks who are low sight, my name is Lisa Cox. I'm assigned female at birth. I am a dark-skinned black woman with a short afro wearing what my children would call a fly pink jacket and a jewel-toned green long-sleeve shirt, black pants, and white sneakers. Always sneakers, because that's my vibe. And I use she, her, they pronouns. And I'm going to ask all of our beautiful and amazing panelists to introduce themselves, including a visual description and pronouns as well. And I'll pass it to you, Richard.
Hey everyone, my name is Richard Lamb. I am an actor, and I've also done a few other things in my life too. I've been a meeting organizer, And as the people who are in the room agreement workshop just heard, I'm currently getting a certificate in conflict management and transformative justice mediation. I was a former counselor of the Canadian Actors Equity Association, so I've got some issues with that as well. And I'm very, very excited to be here. Oh, and I taught as well. Sheridan College and a few other places around town. And yeah, I am a half Chinese, half white, assigned male at birth person, wearing a light blue shirt, black jeans, and I use he, him pronouns. It's really nice to be here.
Hi everyone, I'm Kadon, the Executive Director at BIPOC TV and Film. I'm tough to describe. I'm a Black cisgender woman. I also want to know that I'm an immigrant from the Caribbean. I'm here today. I'm wearing a white shirt with blue denim and black fake Converse. That's what I'm doing today. I'll do for comfort. And I'm so happy to be here today to talk about this very important subject.
I'm Millie Tom. I'm a casting director. I also teach at Seneca College. I'm Chinese female, assigned at birth. She, her. I am wearing a black blazer with gold trim, a black shirt, and black pants, and shooties. Heels as always.
I am Jennifer Wigmore. I am female presenting. I'm assigned at birth. I am from, well, I have half my ancestry. I'm British German, and the other half I have no idea because I'm adopted. I'm wearing a green jumpsuit, the same jumpsuit I wore at the Got Your Back conference in 2019. Just to get that I told everybody. And I have long gray hair.
Hi, I'm Tovah Small. I'm a talent agent at Meridian Artists. I'm a cis white female, she, her pronouns. She, her. And I'm a Polish Jew who is incredibly happy to be here. I am wearing a black blazer, white shirt, and light denim to keep it cash. And yeah, that's me.
Awesome. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And it's such a pleasure to be in conversation with all of you. And my hope for this panel is that it's going to be conversational in style. Do I have questions? Of course I have questions. Which I emailed them all last night, so they should be prepared. But I also want to encourage them, as I've sent in the brief, was to acknowledge and share points of difference, as well as points of similarity. We do not have to agree. It's a nuanced and challenging conversation that we're having. And we're all part of this evolving process right now, so we're not all going to be in the same place with it. And also, depending on what our intersectional identities are, that will also impact what our answers to each of these questions are. So we don't have to agree on everything. We can respectfully disagree, we can challenge each other, and I think that's actually what most of us face in the classroom all the time. And so we have to be open to that part of the conversation as well. So with that, I also want to invite you into the conversation. If there are things that they say and you're like, I would like to have some clarification, please just either put your hand up, and if I'm not paying attention, just go for it. And we'll try and incorporate your question into our conversation up here so we can get clarification in the moment. Talking about power, why don't we define it? What are each of your definitions of power, especially in relation to your specific sectors in the industry?
Great question. I would say that right now, today, I would define power as each individual's ability or capacity to affect or change the world around
Kind of similar to that, for me, power is time of liberation. And it's not only the power to liberate yourself, but to liberate others, that if you have that within you as well, you could effect that. And that you could influence others. That's where it lies for me. I just want to throw in, like, quickly, a couple months ago, I asked a question in our Facebook group, what is success to you. And I put some examples like winning awards, getting funding from Telefilm at last, getting CBC to license your show. What is power to you? And some people get the simplest answer. The answer that moved me the most was somebody said, going into the grocery store and not having to look at the prices. And for me, that goes beyond success, because that person, because of the power, the influence, and resources that they have access to, they're able to liberate themselves in this capitalist society. So that's why I really tie power with liberation.
I don't know if I have a tangible answer for what the definition of power is. For me, I feel like it's tied into free will. I know personally I've been struggling when you ask what's our definition, like what's our relationship with power. And I feel right now, lately, the past couple of months, career-wise, I felt so powerless. I feel like I have no power. I don't have power to get a job. I've interviewed for a few jobs and I didn't get them. And that made me feel like, well, why? And, you know, that sort of has been my journey now. And then the idea of the power that a casting director has with actors. I don't feel like, I think actors, I was on a panel yesterday and we were trying to debunk the myths of casting and you know, and the idea that actors think that casting actually, the only power I have is to bring you, or to curate and bring you in front of my production. That's kind of the only power. I don't have the power to hire you. And that's the hardest, or when I'm watching a great actor, like in a great audition, I'm like, oh my God, it has to be this person. I want it so badly to be this person. And they go, and they just like, nope. And it's like the boring one. I'm like, oh great. We're just going to go with the safe choice. And that's, so for me, I just feel it was an interesting thing when I saw those questions and I just went, oh, I don't even know what to say to that, because again, I don't know what the definition of power is, but for me personally, I feel, and maybe it's right now where I am in my career, I just kind of feel powerless to do a lot. I do feel a responsibility being I'm Chinese and being a diverse, one of a few, just a handful of diverse casting directors in the city, even in this country. And that's kind of a really tricky thing to sort of, you know, and I would love to have more power and to be able to make a difference in the storytelling of film and television to come out of this country. But I also don't get guys, and lately I've just been feeling like I don't know how to get hired. I wish I knew, because I feel there's a part of me that also feels like an actor, because they go in, they do their best, you know, they're, you know, the most vulnerable they can possibly be, and then they walk out of the room and go, well, okay. And I go, I don't know what to tell you. Like, I wish I could tell you. I wish I could, you know, the only thing I can tell them is, if you did your best and you feel good, great. And hopefully, and I always say, you know what, try and make an impression on that casting director so that they can bring you back in the room. And hopefully that casting director is going to work again on many other different shows. And you will get back in their room. And again, if you're not right for this particular show, maybe you're right for the next, or something else I'm casting, or down the line.
Thank you. It's probably one of the hardest questions on the sheet. Because I think my definition of power keeps changing the more I understand my relationship to my own.
Right.
You know, and I keep trying to dig, you know, when I have different epiphanies that happen in my life, my understanding, I have to then reevaluate what power is to me. You know, when the Me Too movement happened, it was like a lightning bolt of realization about what I thought about power, how much power I had, or who I thought power was. And that changed everything. And so I think for me, power is the ability to advocate, whether that's for others or yourself at the moment. that's where I feel that's how power defines me at the moment. Thank you.
In the context of this job and this industry, not so much a generalization, but specifically, I see power as belongs to gatekeepers. There are a tremendous amount of gatekeepers over the process of making work, getting hired. I think every gatekeeper has a huge job to do. Never more than now have I personally felt a responsibility to be a thoughtful gatekeeper, knowing that I am, knowing that I come in with a tremendous amount of bias and privilege, knowing that my world is very different than those I'm going to work with and want to work with and seek to work with. But that ultimately, you know, when we get submissions, multiple a day, asking for access. And interestingly, what you had mentioned about success, I see success as access. The ability to have the platform is success. And when there's talent that goes along with it, then it's an inevitable thing that success will come. But there has to be an access point, and we are the access point. And then casting's the access point. There's gatekeeping all the way
And
through.
educators are the access.
And educators are the access point too.
So many people.
Who they're going to advocate for, who they're going to elevate, who they're going to put forward for jobs, who I'm going to talk about on my roster, in particular to the casting director that's then going, oh, they're the gatekeeper for their process. That's, to me, at least where the power lies, is within the gatekeeping. And everyone is doing it, right? Then casting, the producers are gatekeeping for their network, the network, which has to have a successful show. And ultimately, that loop of power, strangely enough, comes from the viewers. Because if people aren't watching it, nobody's picking up that show, nobody's going to see that movie. So weirdly, it's again all of us that have the power again. But that's where at least I see it lies.
No, that's great. And you're, oh no, please go for
I
it.
just want to build off of what Tovah is saying, and this is why I always tell people the central pillar of what BIPOC TV and film is community. And then building off of that, we are facilitating our community's access to power. So we do that by advocating for our community with these institutions of power. So the telefilm, the CMF, CMPA, the unions and so on, being that voice within those spaces as well. But also being a bridge between that, you know, this is why we'll put on so many like networking events. It's not just about come and meet a friend or hand out your business card to 3 people and then feel accomplished for the night, but it is who have you met, who have you connected with that's going to bring you closer to what you want to achieve, closer to that power as well, you know? And that means putting money in people's hands, but also showing them, guiding them towards the spaces in which they could access that money as well. So it's, and that's why I love, like, I believe, like, you're the one who said that in terms of, like, how you could advocate for that, how you could facilitate that as well with other people, and where we use our points of power, our access points, you know, to do that. And that's why I really central, and like when I define power, it's about liberation, because all of these are acts of liberation that we're working on, you know. So I think doing some more of that. So I'm so happy already. I read some questions. I'm like, I don't know anything about acting, but now.
But it's great because we're already starting to talk about time, and most of us are, well, I mean, I would say actually everybody, to a certain extent, takes what their experience was when coming up and uses that as a launching pad for how they are going to trade and coach going forward. Which takes me towards, in recognition of how you personally define power or authority, whether it be about free will or liberation, safe choices, and ability to advocate, or an increase in the gatekeepers, how is that different for the actor today than it was when you were coming up, coming through, whatever that means for you? You did not come up through as an actor necessarily, but when you started, what are the differences?
This is where I will shut up.
I think the differences are massive.
Yeah.
I mean, and for good and bad.
Absolutely.
You know, there are so many more opportunities. There are much more inclusive and much more interesting perspectives and point of views being in the stories that we're telling or starting to tell that are happening that didn't happen. You know, when I was in school, but I also think that there's also space for more agency for students. There's more advocacy happening, and students are finding and claiming their own power within their right as a student. All that is good stuff. The bad stuff is that, you know, there's just a lot more of them and a lot less opportunities in many regards. And that makes it very difficult. I think it was much easier to get into the business. It was much simpler in a time before the internet. And social media and all that stuff. Like, I think it was the gatekeeper system was actually quite simple. There was a lot less people, and it was a lot easier to get in. So and to, you know, casting used to come to the shows all the time.
Right.
Like, there used to be a real small community from which to pull from, and now that community is just so much larger. It's much more difficult, I would think, for those in the positions of industry to see everybody. But I think, you know, there's good things and bad things. And the good things actually, I think, outweigh the bad things. Because to me, the fact that we're seeing more inclusive stories and that there are more bodies that are more reflective of our culture and the people that we see, that's more important, actually, to me than anything. So,
Yeah, but I feel in a lot of ways, I don't know that the job is that different, the craft is that different, but the industry is like so shockingly different in such a short amount of time. Especially, like, I kind of feel like the double shot of the Me Too movement and then COVID hitting. Like, the plates under the earth are moving. Like things are in flux right now, and there's, as an actor, there is actually a huge amount of potential for a fresh perspective to be heard. Like, all of those various gatekeepers, I feel like are more accessible in a way than they ever have been. Their minds are more open to new possibilities. There's a potential for new things and new ideas to take root right now in the next kind of generation of this industry to be created. And it's happening extremely quickly, and it's a bit dizzying. It's like the speed at which people are being asked to let go of the assumptions they have about how work is made and happens in this industry is really wild. And it's astonishing what has become possible in such a short amount of time.
I think we also have to talk about, Carrie's speaks so much to the acting side, but in the last few years to see an increasing awareness of how racism and colonialism is embedded in the structures of all structures in our society, and especially within our industry, because it's a microcosm of that. And what we see now, like now that we're seeing more Black, Indigenous, and racialized creators finally getting a chance, you know, finally getting to tell their stories. Now we're starting to see that difference on screen. We have shows like Sort of right now, and we're seeing that the Academy has changed its rules, so it's not a gendered award anymore. It's about just awarding great performance overall, regardless of what your gender is. So we're seeing that there are more opportunities. People who have said, like, I do not see myself in these spaces. I do not see an opportunity for myself here. See that now there is, you know. So when we support diverse storytelling, when we support creators of all abilities, genders, sexualities, and races and ethnicities, then we'll see that reflected in terms of who is allowed to be on screen. So that's the big difference that I'm seeing now. And for a lot of people, I think that we see what has happened for the past Canadian Screen Awards. I emailed them after the nominations dropped, and I'm like, I have never seen that much diversity at the Canadian Screen Awards at the nomination level. and then going to the awards and being like, it's not just 20 of us at the awards anymore, you know, like we are represented at every single night of the awards. So I think that is a huge difference. And what I see now is that the main challenge I see now is us not pulling back from that. And I'm seeing that happening. I'm seeing a lot of resistance to it. But that's going to be to our detriment. I think Canada is well poised to make a mark globally in our content, to just spotlight our artists, our on-screen performers, our behind-the-scene creators as well, and for us to go back, that would be one of the stupidest things I've ever seen. You know, so that's a big difference in terms of who are the people who are getting opportunities now. Like, yes, it was easier before, but easier before for who? Exactly. You know. So that's one of the things that I've really been seeing. And then it's to talk about like, okay, who has access to the union? You know, what are the barriers to joining the union as well? How many casting directors of color do we have now? People who are able to understand the nuances of culture, of ethnicity, of race, of these stories as well, who could help to find the talent who may not be in these conventional spaces, you know? How are we doing that as well? So I think that what we have right now is an opportunity. We have an opportunity to launch Canada in a way that is unprecedented. And I go from day to day. I do have the days of feeling powerless and the days of, you know what, I can make much more money in corporate. I can do much better there, you know, I can just go and punch in, punch out, you know, get my yearly commission and be done with it.
You know what's really hilarious? Your voice kind of got a little bit wider.
Yes. I did a whole switch. So like all of that, you know, so but there are days when I feel like that, but knowing that we are on the precipice of something so great, that's what keeps me within this industry.
I mean, particularly in regards to inclusive storytelling, different story that is currently happening on camera, as we have as educators and coaches present in this space, I have questions around what assumptions do we need to let go of as educators about how work is done, about what it is to have a certain feeling and how that is represented. So for the educators on the panel, can you speak to that? Like, what are some assumptions that educators need to let go so that we can have a deeply nuanced, diverse storytelling happening on the Canadian stage? And what are some basics that need to perhaps shift or be elevated so that we can have that kind of storytelling? I shifted that question.
You should ask that question first.
I mean, I did
because you know you've probably written essays on that very question. I'd love to hear your answer to that.
You really want me to
Yeah, I
answer?
really would.
I'm supposed to be moderating.
No, I really would like to hear what you think about that question.
Well,
just reframe the question again.
Yeah.
Reframe the
Yes,
question.
before you answer, please.
Yeah.
Okay, sure. In regards to inclusive and diverse storytelling, what are some of the basics that need to shift in terms of how we teach actors so that we can actually have that diverse, nuanced, complex story on stage or on screen? For me, it's deeply connected to liberation. For me, it's deeply connected to the actor being able to very specifically locate joy and be under the gaze, not just the white, heteronormative, Christian, et cetera, gaze, because, sorry, I'm gonna get a little nerdy, but what the research says is the coach/teacher has an incredible amount of power, whether we want to acknowledge that or not. When we're coaching, we're the coach, we're the expert, and we're the audience. We're all three of those positions rolled into one person. So if we are, sorry dudes, but like cis man, white, able-bodied, English-speaking, et cetera, you're bringing those three positions to the gaze. And if we're not constantly bringing it back to the student around, how does that feel for you? How does that connect to your story? How does that connect to your reality? They will simply be trying to please our gaze. which is what creates that normative performance in a body that like mine, which is queer, which is black, etc., etc., etc. I'm trying to please the white male, etc. gaze. So it's constantly, for me, this is just for me, how I teach, it's constantly about connecting it back to the student. And as a movement teacher specifically, it's about really building interoceptive awareness, because some students aren't even aware of what it is to feel authentic. What does that mean? Where do you find joy and pleasure and truth? And what are the clues in your body that mean that it's actually happening? That's my answer.
Right, Ms. Bland?
Yeah, please.
One of the things that I started changing about my practice when I was teaching students, especially at Sheridan, I would teach one-on-one acting tutorials, so we'd be kind of like talking together. So first lesson, I would always kind of sit these students down. They're in a musical theater program, and I would say, "What actors do you like?" And they go, "Oh, and they listen to an actor or two, and I go, "Okay, what's the performance you liked? What's the moment? Why do you like?" And I would go, "What is it about that actor's acting that you like?" And most of them had never ever been asked that before. Like they could never. They could describe a million musical theater singers, vocals they love. They could play a clip of their favorite run, but they had never thought about their acting as like an aesthetic thing that they were like resonating with, that they wanted to bring out of themselves. So the first thing I was going to say is like, what do you want to do? Like, what do you want to make as an actor? What are you drawn to? And I felt that was important for me because I don't want to be imposing my vision of what I think they could be onto them. I wanted to understand what they wanted to be, what actors they liked, and who they felt drawn to, and then see if we could kind of work from there. But no one ever asked me that when I was training. And I thought about that like years later, how nobody had ever talked to me. The way that dancers would talk about dancing, there was so much more agency inside the craft about what their potential is, what they could bring to it as an artist, the way that musicians, because I'm also a musician, the way the musicians talk and think about music is very, very different from the way that actors do. But so much of what I felt like acting was built like inherently into who you are as a human. And that's how it had been described to me. And I actually, the older I get and the more stuff I get to do as an actor, the more I don't believe that at all. Like I'd rather like, it's not like these inherent qualities that we have. It's just it's an art form like any other. You can bring so much to it. You can be drawn in so many different directions. And so starting by empowering the student to talk about acting as an art form that they want to participate in, that was different for me and something I tried to start working with. Yeah.
Can I just jump in here one thing really quick?
Of course you can.
I think it's really interesting, as not an educator, one thing, I think it's really interesting, even like when, like I was never told that when you represent someone, they are the leader. I was always told it was like, how viable do you think they are? Where do they fit? Where do they belong? Where in the industry do you see them? Who looks like them? Who's done it before? Kind of like that. It's always in reflection of something that already exists, not from something that you are genuinely sourcing in yourself. That is an art form that then, as a caregiver of that process, where you can, and I've made horrible mistakes saying things about people's place in an industry as if I know. It's not my job to know. It's for them and me to be able to look at the person who I'm supporting and advocating for and guiding to say, what do you want? Where are you wanting to go? What drives you? What lights your fire? And what is it? What kind of work is the thing that excites you? And to realize it's not to decentralize myself in the process and let that artist be the one leading the way. And the guidance is there and the guardrails are there so they don't fall off the track, but ultimately that's coming from them. That's entirely sourced from them, not from a decision maker or someone teaching it, like it's just that power dynamic kind of spoke to where certainly in the last couple of years I've shifted in the way I see working with artists.
Yeah, I love the word liberate that has come up a couple of times, and I think if I were to think about the things that I would do for any students at this point, is about elevating and allowing them to understand that it is their process. I am just a mirror to try and help them with their process. I don't have any magic formula or method or magical potion to give them that's going to make them a better actor. I can only help them understand their own craft and their own relationship to that craft, and to help them build themselves up through confidence and support, and the ways in which you can engage students to make them feel joy or to make them feel powerful. Because ultimately, if actors don't feel good about themselves, they're not going to be able to do good work. If they don't feel confident, they're not going to be able to play confidence. There has to be some sort of ability to elevate students regardless of where they come from or their background, but even especially marginalized students who may have not been elevated before, to find ways to elevate them because they need the extra support to feel that they can have the confidence to be part of those conversations and to find their own artist's process.
Yeah, I don't know if I can answer that question exactly, but I know I just came out of teaching the winter term at Seneca, and I teach audition technique for on camera. So I was hired as a professional to go in. It's their final term, it's right before they graduate. And I go in and I say to them, I said, I'm not an educator, I don't have an academic background. I'm hired because I'm a casting director, and I will not treat you like students in this class. I will treat you like actors. And you know, I have house rules. I'm like, I really need you to show up. Like, I need you to come to class because you are being graded for what I see on camera and what I put on camera. And if you do not show up, you will not be graded. And so I have very high expectations. Attendance. Professional decorum. I feel, and I try and explain to them that when you go into the world of film and television, and that's the world that I know, and the program is geared for film and television, so I say to them, you know, it's really important to be kind to everybody, whether it be your driver, it be the PA, it be the person that's handing you the contract to sign. You be kind, because the thing about, and we all know about this industry, is that one day we will be working for those people. Yes. They will be our, you know, and so producer. But what was interesting about this cohort, and I had 2 classes this year, which was more than I've ever taught, and I'm still really new at classes. And what, for me, some of the interesting challenges were that this generation is very, they advocate for themselves. They advocate for their mental health. They advocate. They are great at telling you what is happening to them, which is great, which is fascinating to me, because I didn't come up like that. But it's also fascinating to me to go, you give them you hand them a scene, and I borrow scenes wherever I can get my scenes. But what's fascinating is for the first in my class, I had a non-binary student, and I did not have access to material to provide this non-binary student. And we had this conversation about, because again, even as a casting director, unless the character is, like, I have not had to cast for many non-binary performers. And that was an interesting, again, that's an education for myself as a professional, and then as an educator, because we had to have that conversation with the student going, okay, how are you going to feel if I give you these types of scenes? How will you feel if I give you these types of scenes? How can I help you navigate what will happen when you go out into the world? I also had a couple students that were culturally, like, they were just, a few of them were Middle Eastern, and that was interesting too, because when you gave them scenes that they had to tap into their emotions, they almost, and again, I'm not an acting teacher, so I don't even know how to help them access, because again, in an audition room, I'm not asking, like, you either turn the tap on or you don't turn it on. I'm asking for instant performance. So all of a sudden, I'm not trying to like, I'm not an actor, I can't teach you from an actor's perspective, but, you know, what happens if you do it this way, or, you know, how do you access that? But again, it was fascinating because I didn't have access to a lot of the Middle Eastern material. So again, they're reading white female roles, and you're just like, okay, here, you're gonna read The American Girl, you know, and it was hard. Like, for me, I noticed that it's been an interesting, this term had been very challenging as an educator and as a professional, because I go, yeah, it's true, I'm not gonna bring you in for these roles.
Yeah.
I just won't. And yet here I am handing you, or I'm giving you an audition where you have to be something that you probably will never be. And that was an interesting, again, when we talk about trying to get them to advocate, to empower themselves. And, you know, and again, I asked them, if you want to bring in materials that you like, please, let's bring it in and let's work with it. But it's interesting, just that world.
I mean, that's super interesting because we, as someone who works in the theater, sorry, now I'm not moderating, apparently. As someone who works in the theater, we often wonder, or hear the feedback, well, the diverse students just aren't as connected with the text. It's like, yeah, those white kids had 4 years of working on white text. Congratulations. Of course there's not the same level of connection with the text. It's just not as much experience and time and opportunity. Sorry, I'll get off my soapbox. Yes.
I just wanted to echo what everyone's saying up there, and Jennifer, you already touched on it. You said it, actually, nailed it. And I just wanted to go from another angle. It's about, we talk about joy and playfulness. And to me, it sounds like everybody, they're talking about how do you guide the process of all these actors and students playing. It's a big playground, and if we can find the way to support their playfulness and their joy by finding their voices, then your job is to guide that process, just as an agent, as an educator, as that's it. As coaches.
I want to say too, so I'm going to speak as, I taught high school for 2 years, and I did some youth facilitation and so on. And always it was about how to connect with my students, how to find that one spot that's going to spark everything for them. And I think it's also as educators too, as educators, facilitators, it requires a level of humility for you as well, and to know that you are also learning. As much as you are educating, you are also being educated, and you need to be open to that. So it's about constantly looking at, okay, what's out there, what are the talent, what are you interested in, maybe even expanding yourself to me. I will speak from the film and TV POV. It's like expanding what you watch, who you have conversations with, what type of scripts you read, what type of actor profiles you're looking into as well, you know, how you're expanding yourself culturally, historically as well, so that you could find a point of relation with that student when you meet them, you know. And I would say, like, one of my, so I taught in the Caribbean, and the hardest semester I taught English literature. And the hardest one was when we got to European and especially Shakespearean text, because this was a whole other language for the students in my classroom. The students thrived when we were doing Caribbean literatures, African literatures, because they could relate to those characters. They're very familiar to them. So it was when they were getting to that. So it was, how was I making this new content, something that's outside of their cultural context, relative to them as well, you know? And it's in finding that, in tying in Shakespeare with something that happens locally or something that happens within their own culture as well, you know? And it's in seeing the female Muslim Muslim actor, how can they relate to this American girl actor as role as well, you know? What are the points, you know, they could meet, where do they intersect? And I would say, like, for one, it's just like, yes, as much as we haven't been like familiar with this type of text, these types of experiences, because of the media that we're exposed to, I would say that black and racialized artists have an advantage here, because we have been inundated with white culture for so long, with Western culture for so long. We're so familiar with it, you know. So she may be able to thrive in that role, you know, whereas for the white actress playing the other role as well. So even seeing that, and that's what I talk about also as educators, your humility, opening yourself to learning always, expanding your frames of reference, and then there's another one that was just meant, but also challenging your biases as part of it too, you know, and the limitations that we put on ourselves and on others. So it's I struggle with that all the time too, when I watch something and I'm like, when I think I'm like, oh no, this person won't fit this, or you know, how will I be able to relate to, how will I be able to make this connection? Well, we can if we push a little further. So I think that's what we can always do, and just in general as educators, you know, there's always somewhere where you can meet your students. You know, not just about them meeting you, and I love what you said, Tovah, you know, like that experience too, you shifting how you think about your relationship with your clients, you know. And the last thing I'll say to that is one thing, like when we're pulled in to intervene in a conflict, or someone comes to us with a grievance, one of my first questions is, what do you want? Because we'll be ready to like write up a social media post and call out CBC, Bell Media, whatever, how dare you, you know. We're ready to do that. We'll put ourselves on the line for it, but I want to ensure that I'm protecting that person's protecting and honoring that person's agency at the same time too. So I think it's important for us to do that work, you know, and to know that it is not just about us, you know, and there are very real consequences for actions, you know, when we're advocating for others too. So that's one of the things I'll say, like just in general for like educators and high school English literature is not easy.
I mean, it's
it's super not easy. It's not easy. They do not read the text.
I mean, what you're ultimately talking about is also shifting from having power over someone, from having power to having power with someone, right? Being in that collaborative space, which I think all of us have the potential to do, particularly as educators. So in that vein, where do actors have more power than they think they do? I mean, I'm an actor, and we're like, I have no power! I have no power! What you just spoke to, Kadon, code switching, knowing that I have the ability to code switching is actually very empowering, right? So where do actors have more power than they actually think they have?
Collective size, right?
I think it's very easy as an actor to start to treat your creativity very passively, and as you said, Tovah, to wait for a gatekeeper to choose you, to validate that you are an artist. Yeah. But in my experience, I've been an actor for like 10 years now. I've a few times seen actors choose to take the agency in their creative careers into their own hands and begin just making stuff by themselves, whatever it's for, with limited expectations about what it can do for them. But the shift internally in those people was always quite remarkable. And I think almost every single one I know who really took that leap, their careers thrived after that point. It was like a tap had been turned on inside them. And suddenly everyone else was seeing who they could be as well. Whenever actors ask me for advice about this kind of thing, I always encourage them to just make something. Do not wait for your creativity to be embraced by somebody else. Like, become in the habit of letting it flourish on your own, and then let other people see that and grab it. You know what I mean? But you have to tend your own bargain a little bit. And I think that the potential is limitless if you embrace that idea.
I also think with that, that's like just a really exciting thing to work with. That energy is very captivating. I want to work with people who are their own engines, and I better get on, and we better go together, because I'm gonna get left behind, so we gotta find, we gotta go. But I think what's interesting also, and maybe just a little kind of more pragmatically, everyone in the process, and when that paradigm shift happens, every single person in that process is trying to service something larger than them, and they are at risk of losing it. Every casting director, and I worked in casting for a long time, they lose jobs. Gigs come and go. You piss off the wrong producer, and all of a sudden season 2's gone to another cast. It happens all the time. And so even just being in that room and understanding collaboratively, that treated collaboratively, that person is seeking for you to succeed. That person then is trying to deliver a session that then the producers are going to look at to succeed. Everyone in that, nobody wants a bomb, a failure. Nobody wants a miss. Everybody's there to understand that, I always say, like, take that back, take those 5 minutes and make them yours. Treat that audition like your first day on set kind of thing. But really thinking about the fact that everyone's position is at risk. It isn't about impressing. It's about servicing something larger, which everyone's actually trying to do throughout the process. So there's more empowerment and liberation in being alone in that room, standing in front of that camera, the most isolating experience at times, but to know that in fact that's a deeply collaborative process. If it's thought about that way, and the success is everyone's success. Everyone's better when your work is strong.
Thank you.
I would absolutely echo what Richard is saying, that I think that one of the things that students don't realize is that they are creators. And sometimes they just think they're actors, and as somebody who is not just an actor but a painter and a singer and a writer and a maker of things, that I try and help any artist, regardless of what their medium or discipline that they're defining themselves today as, that they can make all kinds of things, because the well that they draw from acting or making music or painting is the same. It is all the same, and to find at least one thing beyond acting that you can do that you have control and power over. Being an actor is kind of a strange job, because it's one of the only art forms where there's no product that you can hold, or you can look at, or you can objectively criticize after the fact. It really is ephemeral in that way. And it becomes very difficult for actors, because they're constantly looking for that reassurance that that thing that existed that they can't see was good.
Who defines this good?
And then, where did it go? Right? If I make a painting, I put it on the wall, I go, wow, that's terrible painting.
That's amazing.
Or, wow, that's an amazing painting. Right? Or if it's a piece of music, you can record it and listen back to it. I mean, it's very difficult to be able to see yourself. And so I really, really encourage actors that the power that they have is to find the other things that define them, find the other outlets of artistry that live within them, so that they can always be making art and not waiting for people to tell them to make it.
Can I say something this makes me sound crazy, but I came to really love self-taping for things. And I mean that because of that exact reason. Like, I suddenly had the product that I could look at, and it kind of went hand in hand with what I was saying. Like, when I started to think of myself as like an artist, a person with an aesthetic and a point of view who's trying to put that into the world like a painter, I could watch myself tapes back and be like, I'm not doing it there, but I am doing it there. How do I do that every time? And I started to, when I was auditioning a lot on tape, I started to build like a little body of work that I liked thinking about it. And I think so many actors get really anxious about their auditions. They resent the process of auditioning because of the insecurity that it makes them feel. But I came to like enjoy it, because I was like, okay, it's like my actual body of work is the auditions.
Yeah,
and
well,
the performances.
This gig is everything between the bookings.
Yeah.
Right? That's where the real work is.
Yeah.
That's great.
You were asking, like, what power do actors actually have? And I just remember something that I learned when I was coming out of theater school back in the late 1900s. the thing called the Theatre Ontario Showcase. We were the second year that it was running. That's how old I am, yes. And Maya Ardle was running Young People's Theatre at the time, and that was hosting the thing. And Maya had a little chat with us after our showcase. And in her passionate brogue said to us, you have to identify your personal mandate. You actually, as an artist, you cannot be at the mercy of, she's like, you've spent 3 years hearing the answer to everything is yes, but you have to learn the power of no. And it's a very un-Canadian thing. And to be like, in order to exercise the power of no, you first have to, even if it seems like so far on the horizon in terms of possibility, what do you want to be making? What do you want to be in? What do you see, like actually write down or manifest what it is that you want? And it was in that discussion that I realized, I went to the National Theatre School of Canada, and I realized that for 3 years what they'd been ramming down my throat, in one way or another, from like movement to voice, was that the end goal was Stratford or Shaw. Those were always the references. And I hated Shaw, and I didn't understand Shakespeare, and I was like, I don't want to work in the port capital of Ontario for 9 months. And I felt like I was in the closet about that, because I was like, everyone else was like, yeah, I can't wait to tackle him. I was like, I just don't want to do that. And I felt, and I was in the closet about not wanting to be in what seemed like a factory for the festivals. And so that chat at the end of that all, I finally was like, yeah, I don't want to do the festivals. And it probably feels like such a privileged thing to say, but I'm like, no, I'm not even going to do that audition. Like, we're all going to be fast-tracked to the callbacks because we're at that school, and I don't want to. So that was my first taste of the power of no, which then led to, as years went on, because you do have to say yes quite a bit to pay back the student loans, when I finally got to the point where I said to my agent at the time, I think we're done with the gay assistant. Like, I am done hauling out the gay Hallmark assistant. I've done it 13 times. I know how to jingle jangle down a hall in a pink sweater and be like, girlfriend, let's go. Like, I know, like, we don't need to do that again. And I remember the shock in her face being like, but you do this, like, this is what you do it well. I'm like, I know, but I don't need to do it again. And just kind of being like, but it's a job. And I'm like, I'm dying inside every time I have to, like, pop in with a folder and be like, want to go shopping, or like some other, you know, Hallmark thing. But that whole idea of the power of no and actually standing behind it and going, you don't even need to justify it out loud why, but you need to identify what the root of that no is in you and realize that no can be a positive thing. It doesn't mean you're ungrateful or anything, but that it's just like it's not in line with what I want to do or what I want to keep doing. And I try to tell it to my students to be like, start learning how to say no in here. So like, you know, I can assign whatever I want, but you also have the right to go, I have no interest in learning how to do that kind of scene. I don't want to do those. And being like, okay, cool, great. So anyway, yeah, personal mandate and no.
And the recognition that the no is for today.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It can be a no today and a yes tomorrow.
Absolutely.
But today it's no.
Yes.
And that's cool.
Yeah.
The fact that can change. Thank you for that. Susie.
I think what we're coming to here is how do you build power for yourself?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I think even before we start to do that for others, we have to learn how to do that for ourselves. And I'll say like two things happened for me in 2019 at the beginning of 2020. So first in 2019, I realized, well, I've known this since 2015, that where I want to be or where I need to be is within spaces of power so I can affect change in this industry. I was like, whoa, this is how things work in this industry. No way. I'm gonna fling myself in and we're gonna fix all of this. But in 2019 is when I finally decided, you know what, I want to. When I thought about, I want to step into leadership, and I had to think about what is leadership for me. Who am I as a leader? How will I show up as a leader? Who have I learned from? What are the things that I will do, that I will not do, that I had the chance to think about that in 2019. And if I had a team, how will I manage that team? How will I empower others? What do I need to do within myself so that I'll be able to do that? Then at the beginning of 2020, a woman, she used to have a show on TV, Till Death Do Us Part, Gail Bass-Hoxton. She had a challenge on Twitter. It was a money challenge. I only did the first 2 activities. I didn't go further with it, so I saved no money. Plus, it was a great idea. But in the beginning, the first question to us was asking us, what are our values? And she told us, like, get a notebook and just write down your values. What are the things, that are core to who you are? Write those up. And then the second activity was, what are your goals? It could be for the next few months, the year, the next few years, a decade from now. What are your goals? And then the third day, she asked us to look at those 2 lists and see where there's alignment and misalignment with it, And that helped me now because I also knew that I was at a point in my career where I wanted to move from where I was working. So I use that now because now I know, okay, these are the things that I value. I have, now he's 13 years old. I have my son. I wanted to be able to move into a great neighborhood. I knew where I wanted us to live. I also knew that I value freedom and flexibility. I value family time and so on. And I was looking at what are the things that I'm doing currently in my life that are in opposition to all of that, Then now coming into maybe like a year or 2 ago, I bought a book by a Black woman activist in the States. And she has 5 questions that she asks. I only remember like 2 or 3 of them. But the first one is, who am I? And that's a question about your values, your goals, what do you want out of life, Then the next one is like, who are your people? Who's gonna help you get there as well? So I sat down and I thought about it today, who are my people? And not just human beings as people, but also the institutions, the organizations, who do I have as resources for that? But what I love, and then just asking that what do you want is one of the questions too. And what I love is the final question, what will you do when you win? So when you've achieved these things, what will you do? And I think that these are great questions to ask for, and you could apply to your students, to yourself as well. I noticed that, like I watch a lot. I pay way too much for all of the streaming. I've lost count. I don't know how much money I spend. But I refuse to look at it. It comes out of my account. I don't look at it. I don't look at it. But I watch so much and I see like the performances that draw me in. And then when I watch an interview with that actor has such a deep sense of self. And they're motivated by something beyond their performance, beyond their role as an actor, And I love that they will see themselves as an artist. They'll see themselves as a leader, as a liberator. They would, that these are things, they see themselves as a storyteller. And why I ask a lot of creators, so writers, directors, and so on, is like, if you see yourself as a storyteller, that's what you're doing, and you just happen to do so by directing, you just happen to do so by writing a TV show, you happen to do so by performing on screen, but at the core of it, you're a storyteller. So I think like those are the things, like getting a true sense of who you are, that's gonna ground you. So when you have those moments when you're second guessing yourself, you get a chance to remind yourself of who you are. You get a moment, you're like, okay, I'm gonna roll up on the couch, I'm going to watch The Office for the 10,000th time. I will feel sad in this moment, and then I will remember who I am, and I will step back out there. So, but you have to have those things to bring you back to it, So I think that's about building power for yourself, but also how you can build power for others. Because I think if you don't have it within you, it's really hard for you to do it for other people. So it's constantly thinking about, who am I? Why am I doing this work? Why am I an actor? Why am I trying to be an actor in Canada? What am I doing in this country? Or where can I be doing it better? And I think that's part of the educator's role as well, in terms of drawing that out from your students. you know?
Building the power within.
Building the power with them, and just like drawing that, for them to know. I think another thing I do, I walk with a lot of audacity, and I would say, I want to add in this piece that I'm an introvert with high social anxiety, you know, so like, but sometimes audacity, I'll be like, I'm gonna kill this role. I will be great at it. If they don't hire me, it's their loss. You know? It's their loss. You know, there is something else that is there for me, but I'm drawing from what I know of, what I built up internally within, and then the people who I have around me who reinforce that. So I have my group chat, and they'll be like, you better not let anybody make you feel small ever again, or we'll come to your house, you know. But you have the people around you. So if you know you have your coaches, your educators, a casting director who you're friendly with, you know, your agent, you know, these are the people who are around you to do that. It's so easy for you to do that return to self. So you don't stay in the pits of that
That
fatigue.
makes me think of a question that is not on here.
Oh.
Sorry, everybody.
Wow.
But but how do you build that kind of community within your classroom so that the classroom is a network of support to help build the well, to help build the power within, so that everyone is building power collaboratively?
Yes. Oh.
How do you set that environment within your classroom
Community
spaces?
is vital. I mean, and I think that we've forgotten to teach it a little bit as part of our jobs. You know, especially for actors and any artist, honestly, it can be quite lonely being an artist. And I think there's so much competition and hyper awareness of self for an actor that community is just absolutely vital for self-confidence and for understanding your role in the greater microcosm, greater industry. So I think that it's vital that we teach community and we talk about it and we encourage students to find it, to find their community and to make themselves part of community. It's funny because we say this, but we don't do it ourselves. I mean, as actors, we are really good at finding community. As actors, I'm really good at finding my friends and my people and my class and doing those things. But as acting educators, we don't have community. Oh, we do now. That's why. Because it's really hard to be an acting teacher sometimes. There's a lot of stuff we don't know. And there's a lot of things that we think we know that we don't know. And you don't really know what you don't know. And so where is the community for us to come together and learn and talk about these things as they relate to acting education and how to empower our students to find community, but we also need to learn to do it for ourselves. Because how do we model that if we don't do it? I said in an interview recently that I think of it as the height of hypocrisy to say to students, you must always be learning, but not to reflect that back on yourself. I think of that as the height of hypocrisy for a teacher, just to push that out there as, oh, in acting, you're never going to know everything. You're always going to be learning. But for an acting teacher to say, well, I don't really have anything to learn, seems, that's crazy making to me. And the reason I helped to build this thing is because to me that is just not good enough anymore. We've got to move beyond this idea that acting teachers have nothing to learn about teaching the craft of acting.
Thank you. Yes.
So I sparked the challenge of sparking imagination in students, because I think it's only as actors sometimes we suddenly get stupid and dumb. We don't fill in the gaps of text, and I find that most times when I'm talking to the mosaic of students that come into the classroom from all over the world, that our sense of being able to spark the imagination of what the text is saying, what it can impart between individuals, to be able to disengage from the internet and from the earbuds and from the devices, and to encourage them to actually, I've said more than once to them, is to say, you don't understand a word, circle it and look it up. You have these devices that can empower you to knowledge, and knowledge is power. And I find myself wrestling in most instances, and I wrestle with this in my own work even, is to be able to always understand what it is I'm saying. And to be able to impart that to students or to anyone of varying degrees, and that's the other challenge that we face as educators, and I use the small e sometimes, maybe I should be more prideful of it, is that because now we're embarking with students that are of varying degrees of levels of understanding. We have students who are there on accommodation. And I am not equipped, actually, in many ways, to be able to facilitate the accommodation along with individuals that are well versed and want to be well-meaning as actors. And all of them want to be well-meaning as actors. I'm kind of jumping all over the boat here, but trying to find the balance as somebody who is trying to convey to these young talents, and I believe they all have talent. I firmly believe they all have talent, and they all have wishes and desires, and no matter who they are or where they're coming from. But the inequitability sometimes of understanding, they're not big readers at times, to encourage people to read, to encourage people to understand, as again, if I go around this hoop, to understand specifically the why. Why are you saying what it is you're saying? And it doesn't matter whether you're green, purple, red, zebra, whatever. And it doesn't matter what character it is, or it doesn't matter what gender it is, because to me, the text speaks to the character, and the character can be anything.
I think it's important to always try and help students understand that they are completely unique.
Yes, it's a
And
mosaic.
that they bring themselves to every role, and that's actually probably what casting and agents are looking for, is that unique special thing that nobody else has, which is them. And the more authentic they can be about trying to find who they are and how they bring that into their work is actually what it's all about.
And more so now, because the last circumstance I was involved in, that's what they're looking for. They're looking for the authenticity of dialect and language. No more bullshitting of like, you can do RP or whatever it is. They're looking specifically for people and actors who speak genuinely from their place.
Yeah, from their perspective and their heart. Yeah.
I'd like to offer that reading is only one form of literacy. Reading is only one form of literacy.
I understood.
So like, if you're a student, this is about me as an elementary school teacher, if your students aren't into reading, maybe they're into music. Maybe they're into visual arts. Maybe they're into sports. So my personal bias is that as educators, it's our job to find the way in, not to change the student, but to find the way in.
Sorry, but like an acting for stage, for
Yeah.
specific stage circumstance with regards to the text.
I
That's
still
all
think there's a variety of ways in. It's just not about, words are everywhere, not just in books.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm having the debate with my son because he wants to read graphic novels all the time and drives me super bonkers. So I'm not actually also saying this to myself. But there's a, can we be more open to the possibilities of different ways to attack and approach text? That's part of the colonial things that need to shift from my perspective around our expectations.
I think it's also interpretation
Yeah.
of it as well, you know, and I think that's where you get a lot of it from discussions about the script. That's when you get that. And we know that you could give 10 people the same script and you get 10 different performances from it based on how they interpret the work, you know. Like Denzel Washington's Othello, you know, different performances. Like it just differs across the board about who's playing that. And I think it's having an openness about it and being able to flesh out and have those discussions with it in terms of like, you read it in this way, like let's talk about what brought you to, why did you interpret it in this way, you know? Let's break that down a bit more, and that's what's helpful in that moment then. Just see what are people's interpretations of it, and knowing that people's interpretations come from their lived experience as well. Their education is part of it too, you know? Like, I know that there's people who could read a piece of text. I'm just use Shakespeare because that's so standard, you know? Who could read that, could read a Romeo, you know, and be like, oh my God, I see a different side of Romeo in this text, and that's what I want to bring to it. Or this experience that I had in my childhood, that's what I'm drawing to this role as well. So I think in terms of having that conversation with the student, you know, to find out what has brought that to it. I have the same gripe as you in terms of how many people are not really reading. And I had a tweet recently about the lack of reading comprehension right now and people not being able to read subtext and so on. But also knowing how that is contextual too, and that is related to culture, to race, to your society, towards in terms of your socioeconomic status. That's what you bring to it as well. I mean, like I'm sure a bunch of us here watch Succession. You know, watch the same scene in Succession and be like, okay, then I don't vibe with that. You know, but somebody else could watch it based on their social location and find something with it. But I do struggle with that part about a lot of people now, like the lack of reading comprehension. I think the lack of deduction skills and that kind of stuff that really troubles me. But at the same time, it's finding out like how can you meet your students where they are, and maybe a student like that needs more individualized support. You know, as opposed to working in the group setting because there's still something that needs to be drawn out from them. And I think that's also being able to recognize that in students, to knowing who needs that extra support or who needs that special attention. So it's not like you're not taking it because you see a deficit in them, but you see something in them that you want to draw out some more, you know, so you're just giving them extra time. So if that's a possibility, then do that, or bring in someone who could help that student get to it. So you bring in a co-pilot to that instead, you know, so that's what I think could be helpful. So yeah.
Thank you. Over here, please.
Hi. I have to say, when I read Evolving Power Dynamics, I did not expect this to be such a huge conversation. There's so many worlds that coexist, and they're all valid and they're all really important. The question I have is really geared towards my own experience, which is I'm an actor, but right now I want to talk about the relationship that I have when I'm in a power position to someone who is not in that power position while I'm working with them, which for me more often than not is I'm working with an actor and I'm coaching. Millie, like you, I feel powerless. Most of the power that I have is given to me by my students and clients. I don't want it. I don't want them to be giving it to me. I want them to keep it, use it for themselves. It doesn't help, but it is there, so I have to be careful. When I went through theater school, they taught us, for example, Sarah, do you mind if I touch your arm? If I'm going to touch someone, no matter what the circumstances, a scene partner, anything, even some of my closest friends who go to hug me and I'm like, is it okay if I hug you? And I almost never hug anybody without getting consent before I do it. I'm just trained that way. You have to train. Thank you. Just because I use you as an example. Here's the thing though. When I'm working one-on-one with a client, because they have given me that power, they're not genuinely in a position where they feel able to say no. So when I ask for consent, is it okay if I touch your shoulder? I'm using this as an example. I stopped touching students years and years ago. I don't need that speech. I don't need that. You have no that students touch me.
Yeah.
And I'm not comfortable with it, I don't like it, I don't know how to, and yet they, from my perspective, more often than not, although this might not be what you would expect, I feel like the person I'm working for, even if they're 10 years old, has more power than me. And I'm fine with it that way. So here's my question. And I guess there's only really 4 of you that I know enough about to be specific, so I'm going to skip to a room story, sorry. You graduated from theater school and now you teach in theater school. How, like my theater teachers, most of whom have retired lately, spent the last 5 years of their teaching. My voice teacher's not allowed to put her hands on a person's ribs anymore. The Pilates teacher can't put her hands on a person's shoulders to like teach alignment. From your experience, what difference was the power dynamic between student and teacher different when you went through theater school? I'm going to go down the line before you answer if it's okay. I'll be super quick. The way that you're approaching teaching and your relationships, that power dynamic between you and your students versus when you went through theater school. Millie, whether you like it or not, you're a casting director. There are going to, the first time I experienced super uncomfortable power, 25 years ago, the first time I ever worked as a reader for a casting director, and 100 people that normally treat me like me, suddenly started treating me like I was really important and powerful, and I'm like, this is nauseating. People will endow you with godlike power whether you want it or not. They just will. Jen, you're an artist in so many different ways. You were an actor, you went through theater school, maybe 10 years after me, but you know, in the same olden days compared to the way they do it now. And now you teach. How is the power dynamic different? And Tovah, as an agent, again, just like Millie, people give you power whether you want it or not. And that puts you in a responsible position of what am I going to do if I say the wrong thing, if I do the wrong thing? I don't want this power, but it's been given to me. How has power changed between an agent and an actor? I'm not talking about someone you've known for 20 years, and new people coming in. How has that dynamic changed in the last, let's say, 5 to 8 years? Please, discuss it.
Yeah, Michael?
New panel. I got the most time to think, too. When I was at U of A, I graduated in 2012, and definitely, like, I remember the feeling like I'm being taught by experts. Like, I felt like the people who were teaching me were extremely brilliant, great teachers who knew about this thing I was doing, and I was able to absorb from them. I also went to the Soul Pepper Academy, and I trained heavily with the founding members of Soul Pepper, and especially a lot with Albert Schultz, who, it was like, you know, I was there in the height of it being an exceptionally toxic, destructive environment for the actors who were working there, which was also an extremely rigorous, extremely high level of craft happening, right? So it was like both of those things together, and that experience was very formative for me. When I began teaching people, I was like, there's a lot of garbage I don't want to bring into this room that is inside my head. So for me, the start of undoing that power dynamic or changing it consciously was all about context. I would come in and I do not position myself as an expert about anything, but I'm like, I am an actor. I have a point of view about what I like about acting, how I personally have found my way to results that I find repeatable and understandable in the way I work, and I'm here to offer those things to you. Here's what I like about acting. Here are the things I like about actors that I see. I want to teach you how to do those things. I will watch you and see them. I'm not here to like obliterate the things that you do well. I'm not here to make you do anything I do. I'm just here to offer you this stuff. If you don't like the things that I just described, you might not have to take any value from our relationship together. But it's like for me, it's all about, you're still the artist. We're like, I'm needing you to share with you some of the stuff that I've got in my toolkit, but I'm not here to like make you anything other than what you already are. And like that context, which I try to recreate in every individual teaching environment, I find it freeing for me too, because then I don't have to pretend to be somebody I'm not. Like, I'm like, I don't know, I had a student at Sheridan who's like, self-identified as like, I love comedy, I want to do comedy things. It's like the first student I ever met who said they specifically wanted to do comedy. And I was like, great. And I was like working with them as an actor, and their brain was like totally in left field and really wild. And I was like, okay, like I sort of got through this person, I sort of felt like I didn't reach them at all. I was like, cool. And then once we were finished teaching, They added me on Instagram. They have 900,000 followers. And they make these nonsensical comedy reels that are completely opaque to me and 6 million views on Instagram. Just like this person is successful. And I didn't like, and I was like, great, we're not for each other, and that's fine. But we still have like an interesting exchange of ideas.
And in terms of touch, I teach movement.
Yeah.
I ask.
Yeah.
I don't know. And I set it out as part of like my first day, part of the room agreement at the beginning of every single term. And any class that I think I'm going to put hands on, I say, there's one of my students going, what is she doing? At the beginning of any class where I think I might put hands on, I remind students that they can absolutely say no to me. I give them a gesture so they don't even have to use words sometimes. I also warn them that like if there's no sensitivities in the room, like olfactory sensitivities, I use lavender so they can smell me coming. So that they can go, no. So I think there's a lot of ways to cue students so that they do feel empowered, and I agree that there's always a power imbalance because there's the teacher and the student, but by consistent, and I think there is a need for consistently reminding them, you're in control, you have the power, you're in control, you have the power, you can say no, here's how to say no, here's another way to say no, here's another way to say no to me. That you can start to develop that and build them that within them, and then they start to have that as part of their relationship with you.
Can I offer something too about just the concept of power? This was a really interesting thing I absorbed during the transformative justice study that I've been doing, because I feel like the way, especially in our industry, we talk about power, it often is framed as a negative thing.
Yes,
People
I
have power
agree.
and it's bad that they have
Yeah.
power, but we, in transformative justice, some of the teachers posited to us, like, power always exists because power is the capacity for people to do stuff. And power being structured is actually not always a bad thing. In situations where all the power is lateral and everyone's equal, what ends up happening is usually just people's personal charisma becomes the most powerful thing in the room or the situation. So having institutionalized power can often be really clarifying and very healthy if people are aware of what power they're holding and use it deliberately.
And I think removing ego is the thing that I'm thinking about a lot now when it comes to my relationship with power and understanding how power moves through me as an educator, and also how the ego is not actually very helpful in teaching. Ego is super helpful in acting. Really helpful, super important, makes you feel powerful, makes you feel strong, makes you feel invincible a lot of times. But it's not particularly helpful in teaching because, you know, while you think you may know all the things and you've got all your plans and everything, that student may not vibe with that. And that has to be okay. That has to be okay that they miss you, or you miss them, or that they're only taking little snippets of what you have to say and using it for themselves. And you have to give them permission to not think that you know everything sometimes. You have to release the power and say, I don't know everything, and here's a way you can say no, and here's another way you can say no.
Yeah, that's what that's humility comes from. I know I wasn't asked, but I was.
I don't know about enough about what you need to be specific.
So, I stepped in that. I spoke about I'm going to promote, we have a new podcast, and I speak about this. I speak about my struggles with this new power that has now been thrust upon me. And it scares me to death. Okay? And as someone who has high social anxiety, I have panic attacks when I have to come into public space. Like for me coming here today, it was like I love that I came and I had to go straight in. That was helpful for me to do, you know. But as somebody who already has that, and I remember it was around TIFF last year, and I saw how people were reacting towards me, like seeing people being nervous to like speak to me, like, oh my God, you're Kadon, and I'm like, please stop doing that, you know, that freaks me out. And then people have told me like when I walk into a room and how I could be commanding and I could be intimidating, and I'm like, whoa, what is this? And I'm like, I don't know that I give off any of that energy, but it's also people projecting that onto me because of my title, because of the platform that I have right now. And in that moment, I recognize, I'm like, whoa, I now understand how egomaniacs are born. Because imagine if you're somebody who already is so egocentric. Somebody who already, with the little power that you have, you've already been abusing it. And when that is thrust upon you, what could happen then? But I also think that what's beautiful, I think power is what you do with it. That's the difference there. That is the difference. So it's when it's in that moment, like, oh wow, now I see. When people say that, you know, and to quote Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. So we know that is so scary to have, you know, and to see like when it shifts around and to go, okay, what am I going to do now with this new power that I have, or with the changes with which it works right now, you know? And I think that's part of our human evolution for us to do that work. And I still have a lot of anxieties around it, you know? And I'm like, I think I went somewhere recently, I went to a party during hot dogs, and I got downstairs, and I given the person my name at the registration, and her head was down, and I said, oh, I'm Kadon Douglas, and she's like, oh my God! Oh my God, and I'm like, please stop. Stop. You know, and I had to take some time down so before I went to because how that shook me, you know. But and then also to remember, okay, what am I going to do with this? You know, now that I have this, what am I going to do? So even in your classroom and knowing, okay, well, here's how your students look at you, you know, how that's gonna happen, and how are you going to donate some of that power to them? You know,
I think you're ultimately talking about autocratic power and top down.
Yes.
Is not what we're looking for.
How are you sharing? How are you sharing it? So I look at my staff and I'm always telling them, like, please tell me when I have a stupid idea. Yeah. Please tell me that. But I also have to honor that there's a power dynamic that exists. I sign their checks. Yes. I have the power to hire or fire them. You know. I know. So I can acknowledge that while also doing what I can to democratize that power too.
So it's about finding the balance for all of us as educators, I think, of not leaning into the autocratic power necessarily, but also not just relinquishing all of our power either. Our power isn't necessarily bad. How do we find the balance and use it to build the power within our students? Thank you so much for being with us today.
Just quickly, thank you. What a wonderful day. Oh my God, I'm so excited. Let's do it again tomorrow. I need to thank Meridian Artists for sponsoring this panel. Thank you. Lucas will change the slide and tell you that tomorrow, right now we're going to do social time. So we have some food and some drinks outside. Creative Arts Financial sponsored that social time, so thank you to them. Next slide, Lucas, please. You'll tell me what if you're online on Zoom, thank you so much for joining us today. We're leaving the Zoom room open for you too, so that you can hang out and meet each other. So turn on your cameras and say hi to each other. You've been there all day together. We'll see you tomorrow. And the last slide says what, Lucas?